Hello, everyone. It's time to eat, drink, and be merry with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy.
Welcome to Big Blend Radio's special World of Wine show. Our first segment features journalist Kevin Begos, who discusses the research behind his fascinating new book. It's called Tasting the Past, The Science of Flavor and the Search for the Origins of Wine. Then we discuss the world of vegan wines with Frances-Gonzalez, the founder of veganwines.com. She travels the world in search of vegan wines to deliver them right to your door. And then sommelier, wine, and travel writer Hilarie-Larson is back on Big Blend Radio. She's a co-founder of North Winds Wine Consulting, and with summer here, she's sharing tips on wine temperatures. And of course, we have some awesome wine-themed music. We've got blues singer-songwriter Allison, Austin-based singer-songwriter Shelley King, and New Orleans-based blues hound Johnny Mastro and the Mama's Boys. We want to thank today's show sponsors, the International Food, Wine, and Travel Writers Association. They're a global network of journalists who cover the hospitality and lifestyle fields and the people who promote them. Check them out at ifwtwa.org. And also Jeremy's on the Hill, California-style bistro, serving farm-to-table food and local beers and wines up in San Diego, California's beautiful mountain country. You can visit them at jeremysonthehill.com. He's got some great recipes too. So sit back, pour yourself a glass of wine, and enjoy the Wine Time Chit Chat. Have you ever wondered where the world of wine began? What grapes were used and what did the wine taste like? Well, journalist Kevin Begos, a former MIT Knight Science Journalism Fellow and former AP correspondent, was inspired to seek answers to these questions, and he's covered it all in his really fascinating new book. It's called Tasting the Past, The Science of Flavor and the Search for the Origins of Wine. It's out now through Algonquin Books and, of course, Amazon, and you can go to Barnes & Noble, all those great places. But you can also go to his website, kevinbegos.com, and that's Kevin, B-E-G-O-S, kevinbegos.com. We're really thrilled to have Kevin join us here on Big Blend Radio today because, hey, we always like to talk about wine here on Big Blend Radio. Welcome, Kevin. How are you?
Great, Lisa. How are you?
Oh, doing great. You know, I heard about your book and I thought, oh, we're going to get into, it's going to be like heavy science, like an encyclopedia. I had no idea that it was going to start in Jordan with a mini bar in a hotel room and take me on a mystery tour. I had no idea it was a mystery novel. It's great.
I know. And 10 years ago, I had no idea where it was going to lead me either. It started by accident, and I certainly wasn't expecting to find good, interesting wine in Amman, Jordan. But that was my preconception that I had to find out was wrong.
And from a mini bar, no less. That was the interesting part too. That was in a mini bar in a hotel room.
It turned out they just the winery itself, Kremasan Winery, is actually not far away in Bethlehem, in Israel, in the Palestinian territory. So they just had a nearby distributor that was supplying the Amman hotel.
Wow, this is really fascinating to me. We've had a few travel writers who have gone over to Jordan. And I remember watching their social medias. They were off traveling, and I'm like, look at all this wine. Who thought about wine in Jordan? And I know Linda Kassam, she was on a travel writer, and she came on, and she said Jordan was, a trip of a lifetime. It was one of those things that places that are just blows your mind. And, 1 minute you're off on a camel, and the next minute you're in a really fancy resort hotel. And she was talking about the wines being absolutely incredible over there. And different to here, what we're getting in California or the States as a whole, because she just said the flavors were different. And then reading your book, I'm discovering that we basically are limited in what we're drinking, and that's not good.
I know. I spent a lot of my life drinking, the usual Chardonnays and Merlots and Cabernets, and they can be great, but there are literally hundreds of other wonderful wines around the world, especially in each region. Just like there's slow food, regional food and heirloom vegetables in each region. And from the Middle East to Greece to Sicily, and now even in America, people are rediscovering these native.
And you also go into the whole DNA part. I know you've done a lot of interviews with scientists, and I know you write science. You know, that's the thing, doing science journalism. And usually my brain goes, uh-oh, I'm going to have to learn something. I'm going to have to like go back to school on this. And your book reads so easy. That's why I want people to know you don't have to have a science degree to read and understand this. But this is fascinating. I know we're connected to trees DNA-wise, but I didn't know that we're connected through grapes too.
Yes, we do actually share some DNA back to some distant ancestors, but just like we do our own genealogy, scientists started to check out the DNA of grapes and find their genealogy and, you know, where they originated 8,000 years ago, which was probably the Caucasus Mountains, Armenia, Republic of Georgia. So it's just kind of a genealogy for plants, for grapevines.
Through the grapevines. And so when you look at the research that you did, I know that you kind of had this going like, oh, you know, I'm going to be able to find this wine over here in the States once you've had it over in Jordan, and it wasn't readily available. You say that you started this journey 10 years ago, but there's a lot of research to actually find out. It took you a while to even find out where to get this wine.
Yes, at the beginning, I just hit a dead end because, you know, nobody was importing the wine. None of the experts had tasted it. And it turned out they were using grapes that have been in the Middle East for probably 2,000 years, Hamdani and Jandali grapes, grown around Bethlehem and Jerusalem and that area. But, you know, nobody was looking at those wines 10 years ago. And slowly it's changed over the last 5 years. They're still pretty obscure, but they're starting to be exported into the U.S. and London, and Yotam Ottolenghi, the great Middle Eastern chef, is a big fan of the Kermassan wines.
And so when you're drinking these wines, it's the grapes are coming from, it's still from these ancient, you know, grapevines, right? These are the ancient ones. So, or are they newly grafted?
No, you know, some of the vines are 100 or 200 years, 150 years old, but yeah, they would be grafted. So that's still the same genetic variety. It doesn't change because they're not planting from seed. But grapevines have a pretty tough time surviving beyond a couple of 100 years. I mean, there might be some, but so it's the same variety, but would be grafted. They would keep grafting in the same location. So
wine came from basically the Middle East area, right? Or where exactly?
A little bit east. Armenia and the Republic of Georgia are like the headwaters of the Fertile Crescent, those early civilizations, Babylon and the Hittites, and north of Baghdad, basically. And they're, you know, the Caucasus Mountains are very beautiful, but, you know, more than 10,000 feet high in some places and full of rivers and valleys and streams. So it was a perfect place for vines to grow.
And this is the interesting, you know, we think about, you know, the spice routes, you know, and there's the trade routes. And even here in America, is ancient trails, you know, and, you know, the Spanish coming through and that brought in some interesting wine too. Here in the Southwest, you know, we have, you know, some missions, and then of course going up California coast and Texas, there's missions. And whenever there's a mission, there's either a bakery, a brewery, or wine or something, you know, that the monks brought with them. And so when you think about, you know, where you traveled and then looking at these ancient wine routes, I didn't even think that there were wine routes. You know, I always thought, oh, because of the missions here, you know, that we're used to going to. I just didn't think of it in this kind of global fashion for some reason.
Yeah, both, as you said, those Spanish monks and really monks all over the world and travelers. One of the first things they exported was wine and grapes, partially because it was profitable, but also, you know, people drank a lot of wine in ancient times because in some ways the water was dangerous because they didn't understand sanitation. So they would often, you know, cut the water with wine so that the alcohol killed some of the germs. And they didn't understand why that was happening, but they knew that, you know, sometimes people got belly aches just from the water.
Well, I would have no problem having wine as my daily drink. You know what I mean? That's a good thing, especially so. how many, when you think about now in America, what's our future look like in regards to expanding beyond?
Scientists in the South, actually scientists all over the country, from Cornell to the University of California, Davis to Minnesota, are re-exploring the Native American grapevines, which always had a terrible reputation for wine. Concord grapes make good jelly. I think
Right.
we've all had peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but they never had a good wine reputation. And it turns out in those Native American grapes, there's just little parts of the gene, of the DNA, that express these off flavors. So they think they're soon going to get to the point where they can have American wine grapes or crossbreed them with the European grapes, and have some really local grapes and vines that make good wine.
So these, when you're saying these native, vines, I mean, just hiking around, there's like native grapes, there's wild grapes. Is that what you're talking about? The wild grapes that are out there, just out in the trails? And
exactly. Yes, there's a whole range of wild grapes in America and Europe too. But the wild American grapes nobody ever paid much attention to, but turns out they have some natural disease resistance, which could help wine growers reduce pesticide use. And, they have a lot of good qualities. They've just been overlooked. It's just a matter of, finding the ones that don't. And there's a Vitis arizonica in Arizona and a Vitis mustangus in, West Texas and New Mexico that are part of the same Vitis grape genome, just not exactly the same as the European grapes.
Wow, this would be so cool if we started making wine that way, so we could actually, I love this idea of going back to our roots, because I feel like just even in our food, you talk about slow food, that we've got to this point, even, it's like we have the same turkey. Everybody's eating the same turkey. And we've I know there's some turkey breeders out there doing some heirloom turkey breeding, which is necessary because we're almost losing turkeys. I mean, it just got to,
Sure.
Everybody has the typical white turkey. And we start to think about all of, not just with livestock, but, the plants, the wheats and everything. We're starting to lose those heirloom seeds. And I know there's a great movement to fix that. And I often wonder, okay, now we're limited in what we're eating and drinking. We're not doing a good thing necessarily to the soil, I don't think, by growing that way and not going with what belongs there, the native plants that belong there.
That's absolutely true. One wine scientist in California said, look, there's native grapes all over the world that grow best in particular locations. The French grapes are great, but really we shouldn't be planting Chardonnay and Merlot and Pinot all over the world because they do well in certain climates, but they don't necessarily do well in hot climates or very cold. We're native to parts of France. And so as you said, the native grapes and the varieties can really do better and be better for the whole ecosystem than just transplanting a monoculture.
Well, you even look now with, the larger wineries, you get these reports now that there's arsenic in our wine, so it's, and the pesticides. I had a friend who, unfortunately, she's passed now from cancer, and she lived, on a farm right outside a winery, a vineyard. And apparently, even though it was organic, there was still some chemicals being used in places. And she kept saying, she was getting sick. And we all kind of attribute some of this illness from the pesticides that are being used in wine. And I wonder about that. I always think about every time you raise a glass, I'm like, okay, we need to really start questioning our wine and what was used, in the process and in the growing process.
Yeah, I think it's a tragedy because the wines themselves are fine to drink, but the pesticides do go into the surrounding communities and into the soil and into the streams and into the runoff. So, they're definitely not good for the environment. And if there's a way to naturally reduce those by, breeding in some of these naturally disease-resistant plants, they just have natural resistance to some of these pests that attack grapevines. So that seems to me like a far better way to go.
And then what's the synthetic wine they're made without grapes?
Well, theoretically, the flavors in wine are all chemicals. And if you can identify the exact chemical, which they have in some cases, know exactly what chemical, leads to a grapefruit flavor or a peppery flavor. So theoretically, if you have the formula, you could create something with a mix of, water and alcohol that would closely mimic a wine. I'm not that excited about the idea, but I realize I think people are going to keep trying to do it. I don't think it'll ever compete with the natural product. But, maybe someday there'll be a cheap wine that's synthetic.
I want the real stuff. Just the thing about it. There's the crafting of it, and that's exciting thinking about going towards the native grapes, and I think it opens doors for creativity and just because it is a craft. Winemaking is just an incredible process, and it's painstaking. Not only are you having to harvest and grow these vines and these grapes, but and deal with the weather and the soil and everything that's going on, but then there's the actual process, and it takes time. That's the thing. It's not like beer where you can make it in a day.
It ties into local traditions. In Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, we've grown grapes for 8,000 years. They're incredibly proud of their traditions. That predate all the French and the Italians and all that. They have traditions, winemaking traditions passed down for literally thousands of years. They use the same clay containers. They call them qvevri, but we might call them amphora, similar to what the Greeks and Romans used to transport wine. They still make wine in those clay containers, similar to the way they were doing it 8,000 years ago.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. So you got to go out to all these places and interview these people and get into that. I mean, did you even, it's got to be different, but similar in a way to, your previous reporting and being in the world of science. But just really neat playing with wine and clay and all these historic traditions.
Yeah. I knew that it would be fun and beautiful to visit the wineries, but, that was a whole exciting world that it dovetailed so well with the science. And there's actually a kind of loose-knit group of scientists around the world who are serious, in their profession, very top-notch scientists, but they also love winemaking itself and tasting wine. So they have different kind of insights than the rest of us once they start looking at the DNA and the chemicals and the history.
Wow, it's fascinating too about Armenia, because I know that Armenia is stepping up into kind of change. They're going through a change themselves in more welcoming visitors into their country and creating different, like a community, building communities, and it's changing in that mode. Do you think the wine part of it will help them in tourism and to, bring more people to their country?
Yes, both Armenia and the Republic of Georgia, there's some tour guides and tours there that will give wine tours that take you into the region. Like Armenia has the oldest confirmed winemaking site in the world. It's about 6,000 years old in a cave where there was actually a treading place where they treaded the grapes and the juice flowed down in kind of a funnel into clay pots. And they found, both the remains of leaves and wine pips and stems and so definitely a winemaking site, probably, small quantities, probably 20, 30 gallons. Wow. And it was probably ritual, at that time, 6,000 years ago, it looks like it was also a religious site. It wasn't like a bar. It was more a place you went to drink this very special liquid, maybe around births or deaths or, harvest festivals. But yes, the Armenians and the Georgians are definitely doing wine tourism, and there's some great tours that you can take and also try the food and see the mountains and the local fauna and everything else.
That's amazing. I want to go. I really do. I've always had a fascination with Armenia for some reason it just seems like such a beautiful land, and it seems, this change in going into more tourism, that's an exciting time. And I think it's interesting, these lessons we can learn from these ancient places, that have gone through so much and we can learn from, as Americans, as still relatively a very young country, when you think about Western civilization side of it, we can learn. And I wonder now, with the native grapes that you're talking about and that movement towards utilizing native grapes, if Native Americans were making anything with native grapes, back in the day.
That's an interesting story, because it appears that Native Americans did not make much wine, if at all. In the Southwest, they did make some fermented beverages, but it was more from cactus and yucca and things like that. And we just don't know why. There's tremendous archaeological evidence for winemaking all throughout the Middle East and Europe, and even in China. They made a different kind of wine, more that combined a grape they had there with rice wine. But the Native Americans, most tribes, there's just not evidence either archaeological or in their oral histories for winemaking. And that may explain, we know that some Native American peoples, don't have a good tolerance or resistance to alcohol. That's actually, a genetic difference in some cases. So they just did not make it the way the Europeans did. And, Africans made a lot of alcohol, palm wine, alcohol from dates and things like that. But
yeah, it's interesting to me, too, because of South Africa. I was raised in South Africa, and Nancy, my mom and co-host and co-publisher, she had a magazine over there. And so we were covering wine, and the wine there is completely different to here. And they were making wine with like oranges, and it's different than like the fruit wine you'll get from, like in the Pacific Northwest. It was just absolutely different. And I can't really explain it because I haven't had it for years, but it was fun. I'll say that it was fun as a young lady who just got into that world. And the whole culture is different because the wine was on the table, and because there was much of the French and Dutch influence and Portuguese, and we had a lot of Greek wines from when we were in South Africa. I remember you go to a store, we didn't really hear as much about France as much as Greek wines for some reason. And here in this country, I never saw that much. Yeah, you rarely hear about Greek wines, unless you go into a wine shop that has the different wines from around the world. But in South Africa, there was quite a big Greek population too, especially in the coastal communities. But I was wondering about how that all started there. It's got to be from, maybe the French and the Dutch coming over. I'm now like going, okay, go ahead.
Yep. And just a trading route, these trading routes, the Greeks were some of the first wine exporters, first the Egyptians and the Phoenicians, but then the Greeks. So, that could go back a long time, hundreds of years, or, who knows, maybe even longer than that somebody visited Southern Africa and, brought some winemaking traditions.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. I get geeked out on this, like how this food became this food over here and how it molded and changed by travel and exploration, and all these historic expeditions, how cultures connected and changed the food and changed the drink. And, because we were so nomadic too. So things changed according to the terrain as well. So it's not just the cultures mixing, it's the terrain changing and taking a recipe and having to change it according to where you are, if you're nomadic.
Absolutely. One of the archaeologists I interviewed, they're learning surprising details about the past. The assumption always was that, 3 or 4 or 5,000 years ago, local people just kind of ate what was nearby. And we knew that a few explorers ventured around, but when they analyzed the DNA remains of some wine in northern Israel from 3,000 years ago, they found cinnamon residues, strains, and they assumed it was just cinnamon. You can get some cinnamon from Africa, but it turned out this DNA matched cinnamon from the Indian subcontinent. So that meant some trader, and of course it was a variety of people. It wasn't just one person taking it, but that meant cinnamon was coming all the way to the Middle East from Asia, probably by the Silk Road or perhaps by ship. It could have come by ship to the Arabian ports and then up into northern Israel. But so people were, they certainly ate locally, but they also explored and did some real long distance trading.
Wow. I like this.
Especially for things that tasted good. And of course, spices. I mean, that's the way coffee spread from the Arabic countries into Europe, and all the exotic spices from the Far East came by the Silk Road. The people in the medieval era and the ancient world just loved the spices because they weren't used to anything like them. They were used to salt, which is fine. Salt's great, but imagine a world when if you didn't have any of those spices and you tasted for the first time, coriander or cumin or ginger or all those things.
And knowing that you're not going to die at that point, because when you start testing things, when you're like in the hunter-gatherer side of things, you start like, oh, let's try and eat this. And then, oops, so-and-so died over there. Don't eat that again. Right. You know what I mean? That was the trial, It's really interesting to me, for you writing this book, did you feel like you were actually writing the history of the world in some way?
It gave me a new sense of looking at the past, I came to realize that ancient peoples all over the world, really have had much the same emotions that we do. Certainly the technology is different, the religion, the language is different, but people got excited about things. They fell in love with things. They liked things that tasted good. They didn't like things that tasted bad. They, sometimes went to war or then made peace. So the emotions have really stayed the same for a long time. And one scientist told me an interesting story that they know from research that the Bushmen in South Africa, which is a very, very old culture, I always thought Bushmen, went foraging and would eat every single thing they found because, it's a tough environment. Apparently Bushmen have real flavor preferences. So when they have a choice, they'll eat certain wild foods. And then there are other wild foods that they don't like as much that they'll only eat when they're hungry. So that tells us that, human taste buds, have probably stayed the same for 50, 100, maybe hundreds of thousands of years, that basic neural architecture that connects our brain to our tongue and our, smell facilities.
That happy zone of really good flavor, that is interesting about, because there's food. I mean, I've had different foods around, in different countries that we've lived and traveled through, and even in this country, you're like, okay, so why do you people over here think this tastes good? It doesn't taste good to me, but to them it tastes good. Or if you even look at peasant food and from the ancient times, or the historic times, I should say, they'd made do with things, and then eventually now it's become like a staple that people love, and not wasting food. It's interesting, that whole evolution of even like eating the different organs of an animal. Most people will go, oh, we don't want to do that, but some people love it, and what was something of, oh, we have to have that slop again, has become revered almost, in different cultures, depending on where we're from.
I learned that part of it is, I focus on wine, but part of it with the food and wine is just psychological. Our brains pre-process things before we even eat them. If you tell someone that a wine is a $90 bottle of wine, and another bottle is a $10 bottle of wine, but it's actually the same wine, in a blind test, people will uniformly say the $90 wine is better. So our brain does some pre-editing. They've actually done really sneaky tests where they served people 2 glasses of white wine, but they added red food coloring to one, and the test subjects uniformly described the red wine as if it was a red wine, taste-wise.
That's funny.
So, that goes back to what you said about humans learning what foods are safe and what foods are not safe. And there's one scientist, Gavin Sachs, who points out that, a lot of what we think about flavor actually happens in the brain. Yes, the tongue senses things and the nose senses things, but our brain is what decides, what to pay attention to and what to ignore. And sometimes that can close us off to, good flavors and experiences. But then if we just be a little more open-minded, these things do taste good.
That's interesting, because you look at chefs, how they plate food, because, you eat with your eyes first, that sentimentality. And it's like, okay, we're going to do that. But then that brings me to, even when people wine taste, they look at the color and they do the swirl and all of that, but I wonder about when we decided, okay, we have to start, swirling it around. When we're going to smell it and look at the colors and say, it tastes like this, it tastes like that. It's coffee, it's got leather and all that. But when did all those, when did all of that culture start? And the pairing, the food and wine pairing thing, when did that start?
I came to a different conclusion than some other people. There were been some previous books that basically said, all the ancient wine must have been terrible. It wasn't sanitary. They didn't know what they were doing, and some people suggest that we only started having good wine in the last couple of years, but the historical evidence doesn't really back that up. The Egyptians had all sorts of distinctions for types of wine: good wine, very good wine, very, very, very good wine, and even higher quality that was, for ceremonies. And the Greeks, the Romans, the ancient Hittites, there's all sorts of written records of people behaving just like we did, of sometimes returning wine if it wasn't a good enough quality, or, extolling the aromas of one particular type. So I would say at least 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, people started to, choose certain varieties and even sometimes add particular spices to them, flavorings, cinnamon in particular, or myrrh, which is kind of pine resin. And the Egyptians also had a whole range of, I guess you'd call it medicinal wine. They would mix in native herbs and things like that for particular ailments or particular times. So they were very aware with pairing herbs with different types of wine and taking them, say, to go to sleep, or if you, had a backache or were in childbirth or various things. They had literally hundreds of different recipes.
Wow, that's amazing. And yeah, wine for childbirth, that's not happening now, is it? But I think that something did happen about doctors saying now women should have wine before childbirth or something.
Clearly you shouldn't, I think the Egyptians, it would have been, right at that time of labor. I mean, clearly nobody should be drinking wine, while they're pregnant. But I think it was probably more something for pain and for, relaxation, during the actual labor itself.
Wow, this is fascinating. Did you enjoy doing this process? I mean, and when did you know, okay, I'm going to stop and put it all into a book with this research? Because you could go off on different books on all, just even on Leonardo da Vinci's, grapevine. You could go off in that direction.
I kind of decided to stop when I realized that China had a whole separate wine history and that it could not be in this book that that also there are these other alcohol histories of Africa and Central America, but that those were different things. It wasn't wine as we think of it. So I had to put a stop to it. And I also just realized the science is going to keep coming. So I'll either have to do follow-up books and articles. I can't ever get everything in.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? You can never do it all at one time. That we learned that's in our travels. We think, okay, we're going to go to this destination. We're going to cover everything that we can get our hands off, every, piece of history. And then we just realize we just keep going in circles. We just, as we travel, we end up you're going to keep going back. So just get over it. You can't do it all at one time. It just doesn't work that way. So, but it is such a fascinating book. I'm enjoying reading it and learning. And it's just, people, you're going to love it. You're going to love it. It reads like a novel. But before you go, Kevin, I have a wine time happy hour question for you. I want to know if you could have a happy hour wine time with anyone in the world, alive or passed on, that you can just sit down and have a really good conversation, who would it be? Where are you going to have that wine time with them? And what are you going to drink and what are you going to talk about?
I would have it with Leonardo da Vinci in his vineyard across from the Santa Maria dei Grassi church where he paid his last supper. And I visited how that vineyard had been resurrected, but it's a great story. If he was given the vineyard as part payment for the painting for the last summer by the Duke of Milan, bequeathed him the land. And Leonardo kept records of what the vineyard was worth and how much it produced, and he actually left it to his servants in his will. It was probably a Malvasia wine, which is similar to what we'd call a muscat. So probably a white wine, maybe a little sweetish, and I'd have so many questions for him. I'd want to ask him about his vineyard and his wines and the country village he grew up in, but I'd of course also want to ask him about his paintings and art and his whole life, and the idea that I could mix Leonardo with wine I can't pass that up.
So would you drink wine from his vineyard? It's like, here, quick.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He would have clearly been making wine there. Or perhaps he might have taken the grapes to a nearby winery that would press them and make it. That we don't know for sure, but that was very common back then, that there would be these kind of neighborhood wineries that would take the grapes from people. But yeah, I would hope that we'd be drinking his wine in his vineyard.
With cheese. The cheese. Why not?
At that point, I'd be, whatever Leonardo chose, I'd be fine with. I wouldn't complain.
I know that would be awesome. It would be awesome. And thank you so much for joining us here on Big Blend Radio. Kevin's book, everyone, Kevin Begos, is Tasting the Past, The Science of Flavor and the Search for the Origins of Wine. Again, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Indie Books, all those great places. You can also go to his website and go see the map, too, of the wine routes. And he's got some just interesting information on his site. Go to kevinbegos.com, and that's Begos. I'm just, sharing that I can still spell after talking about wine. But Kevin, we have a special song for you, and I just think it's totally perfect for your book. It's called Holy Water, and it is it's actually the title track from the latest album of the amazing blues artist Allison August, and everyone, you can go to her website, AllisonAugust.com. That's Allison with 2 L's. But here it is, Holy Water. Thanks so much for joining us, Kevin. It's been a true pleasure.
Thank you, Lisa. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I've been working many hours. Oh, yes, I woke up a long time ago. I aspire to draw on higher power, but sometimes I just feel so low. You don't know how I toil. I work my fingers to the bone while he's out with the boys, and I'm here at home alone. They say that whiskey is the devil's drink. It can turn your mind around so that you can think, but it's like holy water, holy water to my soul. How they end. And the baby is crying too. And I bet sit down and join them. Baby, if you don't get home real soon, I know that whiskey is the devil's drink.
We've all heard about wine clubs, but how about a wine club that keeps animal welfare at the forefront? We're happy to have Frances Gonzalez, the founder of Vegan Wines, join us on Big Blend Radio today to explain the need for vegan wines. A lot of us would think that most wine is vegan, right? Because it's from grape. There's no cheese mixed in there, but maybe there is. She's going to explain that to us and also talk about her quest to find family-owned wineries producing the best wines, not just vegan wines, but the best. And what she does is she delivers them right to your door. So with her club and also her online shopping venue there, just go to veganwines.com. Welcome, Frances. How are you?
I'm doing great, Lisa. Thank you for having me on your show.
Excited. Very excited about this. I know on Big Blend Radio and in Big Blend magazines, a lot of times we talk about wildlife trafficking, animals, what happens to animals, livestock. We talk about the benefits of being vegan. I know a lot of people, sometimes it's a spiritual reason. It could be a dietary reason, weight loss. It could be also the animal side of it. And just, going on veganwines.com, it really came obvious to me that you're like, hey, we need to realize what is happening to animals to make wine. And there were things on your website, I had no idea that it was that extensive of animal parts being used, and even blood, right?
Yes, sadly, but yes.
Oh, wow. How did you get started on the whole journey of saying, well, I'm going to be vegan, and then decide I'm going to, go and open a business that is all about vegan wines?
Well, I love wine, and when I went to do my vacation, went to the vacation in France, that I found out that for the first time that there's egg whites in wines in the fining. And I was so shocked because I've been a vegan for so many years. I felt betrayed. And I was like, how many other vegans probably are not aware? And my vacation turned into research. And I went and started finding out all the finings that are used, the blood, the bone marrow, the casein, the isinglass, the gelatin, and so many other things. But I also found that you do not need to do this, because if you had to, I would have stopped drinking wine, honestly.
Wah, we can't have that. No, that's not, there'll be no stopping of the wine, consuming here. But, so where are all these parts going? Are they going in the soil? Are they used in the actual juice of it all? Where are these things going?
Well, when sometimes it says the biodynamic, it's the cow horns that are used in the fertilizing, and also the fish fertilizing are used in the soil. So it does start from the soil, and then it goes on to the fining, which is the egg whites and the casein, the gelatin, the bone marrow, and the milk as well. So it's a lot that goes into it, and we are not even aware of this because they do not have to put it on the label.
Oh, wow. So they don't have to put it on the label like other things. We have a labeling problem, I think, in this country in regards to chemicals. But now I didn't know that they didn't have to put that in. So how does a vegan know what's safe and what's not?
Well, there is a site called Barnivore, it's great. They do go out and they search for wines that are vegan, but they are very limited. And so the other thing that someone can do is actually call up the vineyard and ask them, and ask the winemaker and the wine owner. I always do that prior to visiting any vineyard. And also, when you go out to restaurants, ask which ones are vegan. But remember that organic does not mean vegan. And a lot of restaurant owners and managers and waiters, they think this. So it's just you have to be very clear to them.
And then, if there's wineries that are doing that, and making vegan wines and using vegan practices, half the time you can't, drive across the country to get them, or go to France, or, so for you, when you're finding them, I mean, it's not something that you can always order online from them, right? Not every winery is even open to the public to get the wine.
That is correct. Yes, that's
Mm.
correct. A lot of the wineries that I go to, because I go to small family vineyards, definitely always family vineyards. And a lot of them, when I first ask them, they're like, no, we don't distribute. And then when they hear what it's about and that I'm introducing the wines to our
Mhm.
club members, they open the door and they let me order once everything is verified that they absolutely use no animal products from the soil to the fining.
Mm. Okay, so none in there. And so, doesn't it also prove that you can have good wine without using all the animal products?
Yes, because what the small family vineyards do is that they start from the grape. So they make sure that everything goes according to nature, the harvest, everything perfectly as possible until it gets
Mm.
to start the process of making the wine. A lot of times when you use the fining, the animal byproducts is to alter the taste and your experience with the wine. So it's not nature making your wine, it's chemicals.
Okay, so it's all right. Wow. So the wines, I mean, do they taste any worse or better to you? I mean, when you go out and taste, I mean, are you going, okay, this is good wine, this is, we
Yes,
don't need all that when you're tasting them.
exactly. First, the alcohol content is lower, and like it should be.
Uh-huh.
And also, every harvest is supposed to taste different because nature is different every year. So the way the grape is harvest is different every year. So you want to taste um,
Mm.
that difference, and you do taste. You do. They're more lighter. They're more refreshing and beautiful when they let nature do its thing.
I agree with that. I absolutely agree. So where do most of your wines come from for the club and also for your website? Because I know you have your online store as well.
Yes, they're mostly. I started out in California, of course, one of the best
Hmm.
wine countries.
Sure.
And so now I've gotten familiar with a lot of the family vineyards in the Napa and Sonoma area. So now we're going next to Finger Lakes. But we do have two wines that we are importing from Bordeaux. And
Oh,
we will
wow.
be the only exclusive distributors for those two wines. And they
Oh,
will be
wow.
on the website very soon.
So, and everyone, veganwines.com, go check it out there. And they're also on all social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Um, so how does the actual club work? How often do we get a shipment is what I want to know, and how many bottles do we get? Let's get to the real stuff here.
Well, we have three levels. Actually, we have four, but we have a
Oh,
starter club, which is 25 and under, and that includes a red, a white, rosé, and we have a two bottle. You can either do a three starter bottle every other month or a two bottle every month. It's up to
okay.
you, but they're both 25 and under. And
Okay.
then we have the standard club, which is also uh, either it's a mix of red, white, or rosé, and that one is at 135 per month. For that includes shipping. And then we have
Okay.
the Red Lovers Club, which that was put there upon popular demand, and those are three reds, of course, those different varieties.
Hmm.
And that those the standard and the Red Lovers is every other month.
Nice, nice. And so people get it, they have a way of knowing that these are, ethically sourced. And, and there's the animal side of it, but I think also people are looking for things that are clean to drink. I know in the wine world and the beer world and even the distilleries, we're always looking for whatever we put in our body, we want it to be as clean as possible. So do you see people, joining the club for those reasons, just for the health part of it?
Yes, and we also every wine that gets shipped, I personally visited the vineyard. So it's nothing that I Google or just verified over email or phone. I actually went to the vineyard to meet the owner, the winemaker. So there's always a story on my visit. And I want the members to feel like they were there, that they were part of that visit. So I asked the vineyard owners and the winemakers questions, and we put that all together. We put it in a brochure along with a recipe that is originally put together for each bottle to pair with each bottle, and also tasting notes. We put all that in a brochure and we send it out with the wine.
That's nice. And so it's going to be a vegan recipe, right, to go with the vegan wine?
Yes.
Wow. And I'm glad you're doing rosé too, because summer's here. And there's something about rosé in summer, because I love red wine, but sometimes we get hot out here. I'm just saying, out here in the desert of Tucson, it gets a little warm, but we have wonderful wineries. But there's something about, having, I love my Mourvedres and, Malbecs and, that Cabernets and, so I love, a nice big jammy red wine. But when it gets to summertime, not so, you want to kind of have like a little lighter. And I just always find like rosé has that balance. And I can have that little bit of, I don't know, I know it's not red, but it gives me that little, that little tang. It makes me happy. So I'm glad you have rosés. That's awesome. It's the perfect thing for summertime. What would you say right now for a summer picnic? Let's see. I want to know this because you're out going in the Finger Lakes area and all that. Now, for you to go out on a summer picnic, what vegan wine would you choose from your club or online store, and what are you going to pair with it for a picnic, a summer picnic? And where? Where are you going to go?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a list right there. Where am I going to go?
Yeah, because I know you
so
travel
many good
a lot.
Places. Yes. Yeah. We're going to Finger Lakes. That's our next. And then we're going to Italy. We're going to Greece. And we're going back to France. So we are going to start importing more wines as well. But for a picnic, I right now we just we sent a rosé from Bocage in Paso Robles, and their rosé is it's very delicious, very refreshing. So that would be what I would bring along with the picnic, along with my vegan food.
All right, with some vegan food. I know. I love that you're pairing the recipes. That's fantastic because isn't your partner also a chef?
Yes, she's a chef from Norway, and her name is Sunny Gandara, and she makes original recipe for each bottle and pairs it perfectly because I go to her house many times to test it out, and I love that part of my job.
I'm going to say that, okay, listen, you're traveling the world, you're traveling the country, you get you've got a chef going, here, try this for this wine, and you get to taste it all. I'm sorry, but like, what a sad business you started.
I love my job.
I think it's awesome too. Everyone, again, go to veganwines.com, and thank you so much for joining us here on Big Blend Radio, Frances. It's been a real pleasure, and very, very excited about what you're doing. And I think we're in this age of people opening these ethically and socially conscious businesses, and what you're doing absolutely is one of those, great businesses. And you're also teaching us about wines around the world, and we like that. That's a great way of educating us all about what's out there. I think sometimes we get stuck on the same wine, and I mean that can't last very long because eventually you have to have new grapes. So you know what I mean? That's the thing. That's the sad thing. Is like when you really love a certain wine, there's only so much that's made out of it. So especially with the small, vineyards and family-owned vineyards that you work with, but I think you're doing a great education part of it too. So everyone, veganwines.com, and we want to thank Jeremy's on the Hill California Style Bistro up in San Diego's mountains in Julian, California, for sponsoring today's episode. Jeremy is known for serving farm-to-table cuisine, local wine, local brews, vegan food, organic food, gluten-free food. In fact, his own farm is right across the street. I mean, he just harvest in the morning, come in and cook what's there, and delicious food, and the only cordon bleu trained chef in the region. So check it out. Go to jeremysonthehill.com. And when I say he makes vegan food, I mean it's really good vegan food. It's not here's your French fries that happens in some areas that you visit. You know what I'm talking about, right, Frances? When some areas it's like here's your salad with iceberg and a piece of carrot, or here's your baked potato. But we don't have any condiments for you to use other than ketchup. So I just appreciate restaurants that really embrace vegan food and go for it 100%. But we have a song for you because it's summer and you're traveling around. This is called Summer Wine, and it is from the Fan Faves album by Shelley King out of Austin. And you can go to shelleyking.com to learn more. But here it is, Summer Wine. Thanks so much, Frances.
Thank you, Lisa.
I've been thinking about getting away. Maybe I just need a little escape, away from all this busying around. Find a little time to come unwound. It's so easy to get caught up in this race, with so many dreams to chase. Then I hear that song on the radio, making me wanna go out in the sunshine, sip a little summer wine, slow dancing in the park, stay there till after dark. Sweet sound, soft and low, song on the radio. Maybe we could take a little drive out past the city to the countryside, holding hands and talking about love, away from all this push and shove. Take some time to look into your eyes, reconnect our disconnected lives. Remember how it used to be, when all that mattered was you and me. It's so easy to get caught up in this race, with so little time to waste. Then I hear that song on the radio, making me wanna go out in the sunshine, sip a little summer wine, slow dancing in the park, stay there till after dark. Sweet sound, soft and low, song on the radio. After all is said and done, you know you are my only one. Oh, darling, give your love to me. Then we'll hear our song on the radio, making us wanna go out in the sunshine, sip a little summer wine, slow dancing in the park, stay there till after dark. Sweet sound, soft and low, song on the radio. Do-do-do-do-do, 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 do-do-do-do-do.
So don't tell anybody, but right here on Big Blend Radio, we've had some Champagne Sundays emergencies. So, we needed to run out and get some champagne or Prosecco. We like to have Prosecco, too. And it's right before the show airs, especially as we travel the country. And then we realized, we need to get that cold. What do we do? And, things will pop before you think. And we need to talk about temperature of champagne, wine, and serving it and storing it. And so it's time for Wine 101 with Hilarie-Larson. Again, she's a sommelier and a wine educator, the co-owner of North Winds Wine Consulting, and one of our Big Blend Radio experts and food, wine, and travel writer contributors. If you go to blendradioandtv.com, you'll see her in our expert department, and you'll be able to see her articles and interviews there. But also go to her website, northwindswineconsulting.com. She works with wineries and, also restaurants and everybody in the hospitality industry that works with wine. And so if you even pour a glass of wine in your business, call her. So it's 1-800-HILARIE. I'm kidding. That's not her phone number. But anyway, Hilarie, welcome back. And what do we do when we have these Champagne Sundays emergencies? Because then I run and I go, do I put it in the freezer? And that doesn't work. And then things do pop. It's crazy.
Yes, the freezer can be the enemy, especially if you forget that you put something in there.
Oh, it's hard. Like on the road, when we were traveling on the road, and then, okay, this is the true emergency. It's a Sunday, and you go to get champagne or Prosecco sometimes, whatever we can do. And sorry, ma'am, you're in the dry county on a Sunday. Now that's a true emergency, but and we've been
that
there.
is, and that one I can't help you with.
Yeah, but we have friends in places. Even though you didn't know it when you were there, people come out and they help you. And at that point, it doesn't matter what they're giving you. It can be whatever. It's like, okay, there's a bubble in it. We're going for it. And if it's still warm, we're doing it because tradition, by golly, is tradition. But yeah, how many times have we had dinner parties and suddenly forgot to take? You may have bought wine or something, and then you didn't cool it. You didn't. What do we do at that point? Because
I know
I think
that's happened to all of us. But actually, you can chill a bottle of wine down pretty quickly. The fastest way is with ice water, not just ice, but ice water. So if you get yourself, some of us have beautiful wine coolers made specifically for this, but hey, just a bucket would do. Fill it with some ice, put some water in there so you have a nice soup of ice and water, throw in a pinch of regular table salt, and submerge your bottles in that. And after about, depending on what wine it is and how cold you want to get it, it should be at a nice drinking temperature in, say, 15 minutes.
Oh, so that's what I'm going to do in the next. And on the road, we can do that. You can get
yes,
ice.
Definitely.
Okay,
ice and water. Just make sure that you take some. If you're on the road, what I find is really great, and I buy mine in France, but I'm sure you can find them online here. They're made of like a soft acrylic-y plastic, and they look like a little bag, a tall, thin bag with little handles on the top, and they fold flat. And then you can take that with you when you're traveling, take it down to the ice machine, put your ice in, get it back to the room, and put your water in, and stand your bottle up in it, and you're good to go.
Right on. We like this. I want one of those.
I know, they're wonderful.
The thing. So, okay, this is interesting because I'm going back to our champagne hikes. Nancy and I are into this. Hummingbirds like it. There's something about the champagne. And it's different. If you take white wine or red wine, it's different. Champagne, for some reason, hummingbirds circle, and butterflies.
Really? That's interesting.
I don't know if it's the yeast thing, because I don't know about the yeast differences between them all, but it seems to me like there's a difference. But anyway, when we travel, half the time we don't do the big cooler with the ice and all that stuff, but now I'm thinking that would work better. We have like one of those cooler bags, and you put your little blue ice blocks in. And half the time I wrap the bottles with these blue ice things, those little freezer things.
Yeah.
With, I take like a dishcloth and I'll wrap it around. But now I'm thinking that I should just go and get ice and water and put it in the cooler and take that instead. I just never thought that way.
Yeah, that's the quickest way to chill your wine down. You can put it in the freezer, but if you do, it actually takes a little bit longer than the ice water method, and you do risk especially if you got a party going on or something and you get busy and you're distracted and you forget that your wine is in there, and the next thing you know, you've got a winesicle coming out of the top of the bottle. And once it's frozen, the wine's pretty well gone.
That's happened to my beer before, and then things can happen. I'm just saying, because I like things with bubbles. Beer and champagne go well. But anyway, so let's talk about temperatures of wine. So some of us have wine coolers. Okay. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that. Do you have a wine cooler per kind of wine, or do you have a specific temperature that red, white, and champagne are set at, if you drink all of it, like us?
So if you have a wine fridge, you can get a lot of models that have usually 2 different zones in them. So you can have 2 different temperature settings. So, if you're going to just be cellaring your wine and keeping it in a perfect condition and perfect scenario so that you can enjoy it a year or so down the road, you can just take your wine fridge and set it around between 50 and 56. And that'll be just great. That'll keep it just like it was in some beautiful, dark, damp Parisian wine cellar. If you're going to be drinking your wines and you're just keeping them in there, but you pull them out at a regular basis, then you probably want to have a lot of the times people take the top part of their wine fridge and set it to around 40, 45 degrees, and then they'll keep their whites and their sparkling wines and sometimes the rosés in that part, and then keep the bottom half a little warmer, say around that 55 to 58 degrees, and keep the red wines in that bottom section.
Okay.
And then if you pull your wine out and you want it a little cooler, you can always put it in the fridge or in that ice bucket. And if your reds come out and they're just a little bit warm, you can always just, run them under a warm tap for a few minutes or submerge them in some warm water for a few minutes.
Okay, so you at this point, if you do not put ice cubes in your wine, you keep the wine bottle in the ice, but you do not put the ice cube in the wine. Am I right with that?
No, I'm not an advocate of putting ice cubes in wine, although I have to say I've even seen people in France do that. The wine capital of the world, right? And I've seen lots of people do it. I don't like it because ice melts and it's going to dilute my wine, and I don't want that.
And what if it's bad water? What if the ice is bad? Because I'm starting to think that our wine is probably better quality than our water these days.
I think so. Well, that's why the Romans and the Greeks drank so much wine, was because the water wasn't really suitable for consumption. So they drank wine and sometimes beer instead.
Wow. We've put ice in our wine because if you're in a really hot area, and we have been in, crazy temperatures, and you are outside, and you're in a place like that, and you're like, that's it. You're at this point, I want my glass of wine. I'm going to put ice in it, and it's the way it is. It changes it. It's not the same. You're already not in a normal place. You know what I mean? So at that point, it really doesn't matter. If you're already doing that, you're already at that place. And it's like if you're outside and if it's patio wine or whatever, you're doing that. That's different. But you're not going to do it with your $100 bottle of wine. You're not going to put ice cubes in it, right?
Please.
Don't. I know. There's wine at the poolside. There's wine for all occasions, and treat it appropriately with that.
Exactly.
You really the ice bucket thing, because we have a nice, beautiful wine bucket, you would put champagne or wine in it. And I remember you being on a show talking about, people have wine buckets, and you were describing one. And it's a ceramic, and I'm like, we have one right there that we just unpacked, and we didn't even think it was
I remember
wine.
that. Yes, that's when we were talking about how do you keep your chilled bottle of wine cool when you're sitting on your patio enjoying the sunset. And those are those nice ceramic or acrylic double-walled chillers. They don't actually cool your wine down, but once you take a chilled bottle and put it inside, it'll keep it at a constant temperature.
So we don't put ice in there then? You just let it be?
No.
Or do you put the ice in there? Oh.
No, with those ceramic chillers and the double-walled acrylic, they're basically just to hold the wine at a certain temperature. So you've already got your bottle of white wine at the perfect temperature. You've taken it out of your refrigerator or out of the ice bucket, and you want to take it outside or somewhere that's warmer. You don't want it to warm up while you're, sipping away. So if you put it in one of these coolers, it'll just keep it at the right temperature so you can enjoy every sip.
Well, oopsie. Okay. I'm glad you told me that. So now, because you're on the show, and I know you and Rosé, right?
Yeah.
So is Rosé temperature the same as white wine or red wine?
Rosé usually falls sort of in the middle. Rosés, I like to have them, the lighter the wine or a sparkling wine, you want it colder. If a wine has, it's a white wine that has lots and lots of beautiful aromas, or a rosé, I like to have that just a little bit warmer, say around 45, 50 degrees, somewhere around there. So just a little bit warmer.
So cool. I have to ask, do you have one of those thermometers that people use to cook with? Do you go stick that in your wine glass to find out if it's the right temperature?
I have actually a wine thermometer.
Okay, so there's a wine thermometer. Okay, this is important news. Okay.
Yes, you can get little thermometers that are specifically for wine, and some of them have little hooks or little balancing things so you can rest it on the edge of your glass. I mean, seriously? I don't use it very often, but we have done some experiments where we'll take a wine and we'll pour it in a couple of different, maybe 3 samples of it, and have them at different temperatures and see what the difference is in the way the wine tastes and smells. And it does make a difference.
Wow. It does. This is amazing stuff. I geek out on it. I think it's so cool because it's like, to me, what's so important is the winemaker goes through so much to grow the grapes, harvest the grapes, then make the wine. I mean, how long does it take to actually make a bottle of wine for it to be out and being poured? Like, how long are we looking at in general? Like,
well, it depends. White wines are the first wines to come out. So the grapes are harvested in September. So let's say last month they harvested Pinot Gris. Mm-hmm. It will probably be, most wines will probably put that in bottle in, say, February, March, somewhere around there. And then it'll be on the shelves anywhere from a couple of months to, from, say, 2 to 6 or 8 months later. Other wines, red wines, of course, they take longer because they go from once they're fermented, then they go in the barrel to rest and develop their flavors and mature. So those usually take, if the grapes are picked in September, they're probably in barrel for about a year, 2 years, or 3 years, and then they go into bottle. So white wine's much faster from, vineyard to your glass. And then red wines, and then champagnes are one of the longer ones, too, because those are cellared for quite a long time.
Well, what's interesting about the red wine is, like, you tend to drink that a little slower, and you tend to savor that a little bit more. Whereas the lighter wines, I was laughing about patio wines, but, white wines, too, depending, there's this savor at moment. But, we were talking about this on the show before where, the white wine comes out earlier, and you start with champagne or sometimes end with champagne, depending what's going on. But there's that. It's interesting. It seems like it's the march of the white wines, and we take our time, and then finally we get to the red.
Well, and I think white wines, too, they're just, because most of them, not all, but a lot of white wine varieties are lighter and more refreshing, and they are served chilled. So they're a nice way to sort of begin your meal. They perk up your taste, and the acidity of the wine perks up your taste buds and gets your mouth salivating and ready to enjoy your meal. And they tend to go better with, say, starters like seafood or salads and sort of the lighter things that we begin a meal with. Whereas the red wines, maybe come later because you've already got your palate warmed up and you've had some food, and then you have the bigger wines. They go with the bigger food, with your bigger proteins, your meats, and so on. And so,
but it seems
definitely.
To go with
there's a method to the madness.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like it's just interesting how it all kind of has its cycle and how the cycles unite in a way. That's what I'm saying. That's it's interesting. And then we haven't even talked about sheep yet and biodynamic wine. There's cycles there. There's environmental cycles that happen with wine. So very cool stuff. Thank you so much for giving us some tips on temperature. Again, everyone, you can go to northwindswineconsulting.com. And also, she is on Twitter. Hilary's on Twitter, so you can go to Northwinds Wine, Northwinds Wine on Facebook and Instagram. And again, go to blendradioandtv.com, and you'll find Hilary under the expert department, or just type in Hilary on any of the search boxes of both our websites, also nationalparktraveling.com, because she also writes about wine destinations there as well. Thank you so much, Hilary.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
We want to give a big shout out and thanks to our guest today on Big Blend Radio's special World of Wine show, Kevin Begos, the author of Tasting the Past, The Science of Flavor, and the Search for the Origins of Wine. We also spoke with Frances Gonzalez, the founder of veganwines.com, and sommelier-Hilarie-Larson, co-founder of Northwinds Wine Consulting. Also, again, another shout out and thank you to today's show sponsors, the International Food, Wine, and Travel Writers Association, a global network of journalists who cover the hospitality and lifestyle fields and the people who promote them. You can visit them at ifwtwa.org. And Jeremy's on the Hill, California-style bistro, serving farm-to-table food and local beers and wines up in San Diego's beautiful mountain country. Check it out at jeremysonthehill.com. As always, thank you, listeners, for joining us here on Big Blend Radio. We air Monday through Thursdays at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and Fridays and Sundays at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can visit us at bigblendradio.com to see the upcoming show schedule, and also to click through to listen on demand to through one of your favorite podcast outlets. And now it's time to close with some rock and blues from Johnny Mastro and the Mama's Boys. Here's their song Wine Headed, and you can keep up with them at johnnymastro.com.
When you see your baby low down in the street, begging out for nickel, man, everyone she meet. Little girl used to be nice and fine, shot at the title, got knocked out by wine. She's wine-headed, she's wine-headed, and my wine-headed woman, right on the promised land. Well, if there's wine in heaven, she's gonna tell you where it's at. She's gonna roll around and bake it fat. Then when the devil reaches up his big hand, she's gonna slide right on to the promised land. She's wide-headed, she's wide-headed, she's my wide-headed woman. Right on, right on, right on. Way up north, right on. Way back east, right on. Way down south, right on. Way out west, right on, wide-headed. Take me to the promised land. Monkey told the tiger, jumping on the line, you ain't never seen a little girl like mine. Monkey told the tiger, man, it's alright, it's alright. My woman drank until